The sound of sledgehammer against metal echoed through the Fosters' backyard like a gunshot, making 72-year-old Benjamin Foster jump out of his rocking chair on their porch. On the other side of the fence, a team of men wearing Meadowbrook HOA uniforms were invading his property in Winchester, Virginia, methodically dismantling his precious collection of historic farm equipment. "Stop right there." Benjamin's voice shook as he leaned on his cane, descending the porch steps as fast as his arthritis would allow. "You have no right to be here." Donald Thompson, the new president of the Homeowners Association, watched the scene with his arms crossed and a satisfied smile on his face. Tall, thin, and with perfectly combed gray hair, he represented everything Benjamin despised about the new generation of residents who were turning Winchester into a standardized suburb. "Actually, Mr. Foster, we have every right," Thompson replied, pulling a document from his blazer pocket. "As per the notice sent 30 days ago, your collection violates HOA guidelines on outdoor storage. Since you have not taken action, we are exercising our right to remove these items." Benjamin felt his heart squeeze as one of the workers ripped the original nameplate off his 1922 Fordson F-Tractor, a piece his grandfather had bought new to work the family land. "This isn't junk. These are cataloged historical artifacts. Museums lend these pieces for exhibitions." Margaret Foster, his 45-year-old daughter, came running from the house when she heard the commotion. A lawyer specializing in real estate law, she instantly recognized the illegality of the situation. "Mr. Thompson, you are committing several crimes right now. This property has a historic exemption registered with the county, and this equipment is listed as cultural heritage." Thompson just shrugged. "The HOA rules are clear, Ms. Foster. Your father has had ample time to bring the property up to community standards." "Community?" Benjamin practically spat the word. "My family has farmed this land for 5 generations. You arrived yesterday and you think you can erase our history?" Margaret put her hand on her father's shoulder, trying to calm him down, while filming the scene with her cell phone. She noticed that the workers had already loaded several smaller pieces into a truck. "Where are you taking this equipment?" "To a safe deposit," Thompson answered vaguely. "Mr. Foster will be able to claim the parts upon payment of the accumulated fines." "This is theft!" Benjamin shouted, his hands shaking with anger. "That hand plow belonged to the first settlers of the Shenandoah Valley. The Museum of Agricultural History offered me $50, your dollars just for it." Margaret realized she needed to act quickly. She called the police while continuing to film, but knew it would be difficult to stop the immediate damage. The Meadowbrook HOA had become notorious in the area for its aggressive tactics since Thompson had taken over as president 6 months earlier. "Dad, I'll figure this out," she promised, as she typed frantically on her cell phone. "I'll call Jerry at the county attorney's office. He can issue an emergency injunction." But Benjamin barely listened. His normally gentle blue eyes were fixed on Thompson with an intensity Margaret had never seen before. "You have no idea what you're destroying, do you? Every piece here tells a story. The sweat and tears of generations of farmers who built this country." Thompson checked his watch impatiently. "Spare me the melodrama, Mr. Foster. Meadowbrook is modernizing. Your collection of antique hardware depreciates the value of every property in the neighborhood." Just then, 2 county police cars arrived with their sirens on. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had known the Fosters for years, quickly assessed the situation. "Mr. Thompson, I need to see the documentation authorizing this removal." While Thompson was arguing with the officers, Margaret noticed something disturbing. A second truck had already driven off during the confusion, taking part of the collection with it. She quickly wrote down the license plate, but had a terrible feeling about the fate of those historic pieces. Benjamin collapsed into his rocking chair, suddenly looking much older. "Margaret, that tractor. Your grandfather taught me to drive it when I was 12. I spent every summer of my youth restoring those machines with my father. Every screw, every part." Margaret hugged her father, feeling his fragility for the first time. "We'll get everything back, Dad. I promise." Over the next few days, the truth began to emerge. Thompson had quickly sold the most valuable pieces of the collection to several buyers, claiming to have legal authority from the HOA to carry out the transaction. The money had disappeared, and he refused to reveal the identity of the buyers. The case quickly gained local media attention. The Shenandoah Valley farming community was especially outraged by the destruction of such a significant historical collection. Margaret discovered that other families had also been victims of similar actions by the HOA under Thompson's management. "This isn't just about our family anymore," Margaret explained to her father as they prepared the paperwork for the lawsuit. "Thompson is using the HOA as a front for a larger criminal scheme. We need to expose this before more history is lost." Benjamin nodded, a new fire in his eyes. "Your mother always said that some battles need to be fought not for the victory, but for the principle. I think I finally understand what she meant." As the sun set over the Winchester fields, father and daughter gazed at the empty space where the collection once stood. But instead of defeat, there was determination in the air. The fight to preserve the Foster legacy was just beginning, and Margaret had a feeling that this battle would forever change the dynamic between HOAs and historic homeowners throughout the region. Margaret Foster ran her fingers over the worn surface of the old photograph. In it, her grandfather was smiling proudly next to the 1922 Fordson F, with Benjamin, still a child, sitting in the driver's seat. The yellowed image contrasted painfully with the empty space in the yard where the historic collection had once rested. "I found something," said Rita Martinez, the private investigator hired by Margaret, placing a folder on the Foster's kitchen table. "Donald Thompson has a pattern. Before Meadowbrook, he presided over 3 other HOAs in different states. In each, there were allegations of forced sales of properties and disappearances of valuable items." Benjamin, who was feeding his chickens through the kitchen window, approached with interest. His tired eyes took on a glint of hope. "So he's a professional crook?" "Worse." Rita opened the folder, revealing documents and photographs. "He operates with a network of antique dealers and private collectors. We've identified connections to suspicious auctions in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. Always the same modus operandi. He uses HOA regulations as a pretext to confiscate valuable items, which then turn up at private auctions." Margaret photographed each document with her cell phone. "This explains why he refuses to reveal the buyers. It's an organized operation." Margaret's phone rang. It was Jerry Patterson, the county prosecutor. "Margaret, you need to see this. We've just received an anonymous tip about an auction in Harrisonburg. Apparently some pieces from your father's collection will be sold tonight." "Harrisonburg? That's less than 2 hours from here." Margaret checked her watch. "There's still time to stop it." Rita was already reaching for her keys. "I'll go with you. I have contacts in the local police." Benjamin tried to get up. "I'm going too." "Dad, please stay here." Margaret gently made him sit down again. "We need someone to monitor whether Thompson tries anything while we're away. Also, Caroline will be here later for the meeting with the other residents." Caroline Chen, president of the Shenandoah Valley Historical Association, was organizing a resistance movement against the HOA's predatory practices. Several historic homeowners in the area had reported similar experiences with Thompson. On the drive to Harrisonburg, Margaret and Rita discussed strategies as the sun began to set over the Blue Ridge Mountains. "The problem is that Thompson is smart," Rita explained. "He always operates within a gray zone of the law, using HOA regulations as cover. But this time he went too far," Margaret replied, her jaw tense. "That collection wasn't just a collection of old machines. It was a living record of American agricultural history." Arriving at the auction site, an old warehouse on the outskirts of Harrisonburg, Margaret immediately recognized the colonial handplow among the items on display. Her heart raced when she saw the museum's cataloging label still attached to it. "There's our proof," she whispered to Rita, who was discreetly photographing everything with a professional camera. "That tag proves that Thompson knew exactly the historical value of what he was stealing." The auction was about to begin when the warehouse doors burst open violently, FBI agents, accompanied by local police, entered the premises. "This is an illegal auction of stolen property," announced Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez. "All items are seized as evidence." In the ensuing chaos, Margaret noticed a man trying to escape out the back. It was Stephen Walsh, the Meadowbrook HOA treasurer who always supported Thompson in his questionable decisions. She signaled to Rita, who quickly intercepted Walsh before he reached his car. "Mr. Walsh," Rita smiled, flashing her investigator's badge. "I think we have a lot to talk about regarding your recent financial transactions." Back in Winchester, Benjamin was receiving a growing group of indignant residents in his office. Caroline Chen presented historical documents proving the cultural importance of the properties Thompson had been attacking. "This isn't just about preserving old buildings or collections," Caroline explained. "It's about protecting the very identity of this region. Every farm, every agricultural implement tells a part of American history." Robert Mills, a 68-year-old farmer, stood up with difficulty. "Thompson also tried to confiscate my collection of antique tools last month. He said it violated the HOA's code on outdoor storage. I had to lock everything in the barn. And with me, he imposed an absurd fine because I refused to remove the property's original fence," added Susan Patterson, owner of a historic colonial-era home. "He said the style didn't fit with the standard of the neighborhood." Benjamin's phone rang. It was Margaret. When he put it on speaker, her voice was full of emotion. "Dad, we've recovered the plow and a few other parts. The FBI is involved now. It seems that Thompson and Walsh are part of a gang that specializes in antique theft." A collective sigh of relief went through the room. Caroline quickly started making notes. "This changes everything. We can use this case to push for changes in state legislation on HOAs and historic properties." Benjamin looked out the window at the dusk, thinking of his father and grandfather. "You know, for generations, my family has preserved these machines not for their monetary value but for what they represent. They are silent witnesses to American progress, to the hard work that built this country." As the meeting continued, Margaret and Rita returned to Winchester with the first pieces recovered from the collection. It was only the beginning of a larger battle, not only for the preservation of the Fosters' heritage, but for the very soul of rural America's historic communities. Prosecutor Jerry Patterson's office was buzzing with activity that morning when Margaret Foster arrived with a pile of documents. The discoveries of the last few weeks had turned her father's case into a federal investigation into a historical antiquities trafficking ring. "You won't believe what we've discovered," Jerry said, leading Margaret into a meeting room where FBI agents were organizing photos and documents on a large board. "Thompson wasn't just stealing in Winchester. We have evidence linking him to dozens of similar cases in 5 different states." Special Agent Rodriguez pointed to a series of photographs. "These are historic properties that have been targeted by the scam in the last 3 years. The pattern is always the same. Thompson takes control of HOAs in areas with high historic potential, then uses rigged regulations to confiscate and sell valuable items." Margaret recognized some of the pieces in the photos: farm implements, colonial furniture, even a collection of antique carriages. How did he manage to operate for so long without getting caught? "People like Thompson thrive by exploiting legal loopholes," explained Rita Martinez, who had just arrived with new files. "HOAs have significant powers over property, and many victims simply don't have the resources to fight back legally." A movement at the door caught everyone's attention. It was Caroline Chen, accompanied by an elderly gentleman Margaret didn't know. "This is Douglas McPherson," Caroline introduced. "He was the former president of the Meadowbrook HOA before Thompson." McPherson looked nervous, but determined. "I came to tell you what I know. Thompson didn't assume the presidency legitimately. He used blackmail and forged documents to force me to resign." This revelation caused a stir in the room. Jerry quickly started taking notes while Rodriguez asked specific questions about dates and documents. Margaret realized that they were facing a crucial piece of the puzzle. "Mr. McPherson," Margaret asked gently, "why did you decide to speak now?" The elderly man pulled an old photograph out of his pocket. It showed a family farm with agricultural equipment similar to that in Benjamin's collection. Because I saw what happened to your father on the news. My family also had a similar collection on our farm in Maine. Thompson destroyed it 2 years ago, using the same methods. Meanwhile, in Winchester, Benjamin received an unexpected visit. Stephen Walsh, the HOA treasurer now under investigation, seemed to have aged decades since his arrest and subsequent release on bail. "Mr. Foster," Walsh began, visibly upset, "I've come to apologize and offer information. Thompson is not who we thought he was. He works for a larger group, international collectors who specifically target American historical heritage." Benjamin studied the man in front of him, recognizing the signs of someone carrying an immense weight on his conscience. "Why did you help him, Mr. Walsh?" "At first I thought it was just normal HOA regulations," Walsh explained, running his hand through his gray hair. "By the time I realized the truth, Thompson had enough material to incriminate me. But I can't live with that anymore." Walsh handed Benjamin a USB stick. "Here's everything: sales records, locations of the pieces sold, buyers' contacts. Thompson will kill me when he finds out, but his collection deserves to be preserved." In Harrisonburg, Rita and Margaret worked with regretful buyers who had acquired pieces from the Foster collection, many without knowing their origin. One private collector from Rhode Island had bought the 1922 Fordson F and, on discovering its history, offered to return it free of charge. "It's amazing how this story is bringing people together," Rita commented as they drove back to Winchester. "Every person who helps recover a piece is, in a way, preserving a piece of American history." Margaret nodded, thinking how happy her father would be to see his beloved tractor again. "You know what's ironic? Thompson wanted to erase our history, but he ended up creating a larger historic preservation movement than ever existed in the region." Arriving home, they found Benjamin chatting animatedly with Caroline and a group of historians. Walsh's USB stick had revealed a much bigger operation than they had imagined, with international ramifications. "We need to act fast," Caroline warned, showing printed emails. "Some of the unsold pieces are scheduled to be shipped to buyers in Europe next week." Jerry Patterson arrived at that moment with urgent news. "Thompson has discovered that Walsh has handed over the evidence. He's trying to leave the country. FBI agents are on their way to Dulles Airport right now." Events unfolded quickly over the next few hours. Thompson was detained trying to board a flight to Zurich. In his luggage, they found documents detailing the entire antiquities trafficking operation, including connections to international criminal organizations. The Winchester community mobilized to help recover the pieces. Farmers offered trucks for transportation, historians volunteered to authenticate the recovered items, and even former critics of Benjamin's collection now understood its historical importance. "Dad," Margaret said as they watched the first shipment of recovered pieces arrive, "I think this fight turned out to be about something much bigger than our family." Benjamin smiled, his eyes watering as he watched his beloved tractor being carefully unloaded. "Your mother always said that sometimes you have to lose something to understand its true value. But in this case, I think the whole community has discovered the value of preserving our history." The shadows of dusk lengthened over Winchester, but for the first time in weeks, they brought with them not apprehension, but hope. The fight to preserve the Foster legacy had turned into a movement to protect American history, uniting people from different backgrounds around a common cause. The FBI office in Richmond was buzzing with activity as agents organized evidence in what had become one of the largest cases of trafficking in historical antiquities in the eastern United States. Margaret Foster watched, fascinated, as Agent Rodriguez presented a digital screen with international connections to Thompson's scheme. "The European buyers are just the tip of the iceberg," Rodriguez explained, pointing to a complex web of transactions. Thompson was working for a cartel that specialized in cleaning American historical artifacts. They specifically targeted rural areas with rich agricultural heritage. Benjamin, who had insisted on coming despite his tiredness, adjusted his glasses to better examine the images. That's my colonial plow. Was it scheduled to be sent to a collector in Munich? Rita Martinez entered the room carrying new files. Yes, and for an astronomical price. The German buyer had offered $180,000 for the plow alone. Thompson was drastically undervaluing the items here to inflate profits on the European market. But we haven't found all the parts yet, Margaret noted, consulting her list. The 1925 Farmall tractor and the antique combine harvester are still missing. Caroline Chen, who was coordinating the historic preservation efforts, came up with a surprising discovery. I think I know where they might be. I just got a call from an antique dealer in Roanoke. He recognized the pieces in an abandoned warehouse that Thompson was renting under an assumed name. The news immediately mobilized a team. As the agents prepared for the operation in Roanoke, Walsh, the former HOA treasurer, continued to collaborate with crucial new information. Thompson had an elaborate system, Walsh explained, his voice laden with guilt. He would study communities with historic potential, infiltrate local HOAs, and start pressuring specific homeowners. He always focused on valuable collections that could be classified as violations of regulations. Benjamin shook his head in disgust. How many other historical collections were destroyed before we discovered it? The answer came from Robert Mills, who had just arrived with a group of local farmers. More than we can imagine, Mr. Foster. But we're organizing a network of landowners to locate and recover stolen historical artifacts throughout the valley. Margaret looked at the map on the wall, where red dots marked each location affected by Thompson's scheme. It's like he's systematically erasing American agricultural history piece by piece. Jerry Patterson hurried into the room. We have a complication. Thompson is trying to cut a deal with the federal prosecutor's office. He's offered information about the international network in exchange for a reduced sentence. We can't let him off the hook so easily, Margaret protested. Not after all the damage he's done. He won't get away with it, Rodriguez assured her. The evidence we have is too solid. The deal will only be considered if he returns all the pieces and hands over everyone involved. At that moment, a team returned from Roanoke with encouraging news. The warehouse had been located, and inside were not only the missing pieces from the Foster collection, but also dozens of other historical artifacts stolen from different properties. It's like a crime museum, commented Rita, showing photos of the warehouse on her tablet. Each piece has a family, a history that Thompson tried to erase. The discovery provoked a wave of emotion among those present. Benjamin couldn't hold back the tears when he saw photos of his beloved Farmall, still bearing the identifying marks his father had engraved decades ago. Caroline quickly set about organizing a team of historians and conservators to properly catalogue and preserve each item recovered. This goes beyond simply returning the pieces. We need to document everything to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself. Meanwhile, in Winchester, the community was mobilizing in unexpected ways. Robert Mills had organized a group of volunteers to restore the space in the Fosters' backyard, preparing it to welcome back the historic collection. It's not just about old machines, Mills explained as he supervised the work. It's about preserving our cultural heritage. Each piece tells a story of American innovation, perseverance, and progress. Margaret, watching events unfold, realized that Thompson's crime had inadvertently catalyzed something extraordinary, a renewed awareness of the importance of rural historic preservation. Sometimes, Benjamin reflected, sitting in his rocking chair as he watched the volunteers at work, it takes almost losing something for people to understand its true value. The fight for justice was far from over. But now there was an entire community committed to preserving not just the Foster collection, but an entire historical legacy that had almost been lost forever. The sun was setting over Winchester, casting long shadows over the Fosters' backyard, where their precious collection would soon once again silently tell the story of generations of American farmers. The federal courtroom in Richmond was packed that fall morning. Benjamin Foster, sitting in First Daughter next to Margaret, watched Donald Thompson in his orange prison suit. The man who had tried to destroy his family legacy seemed smaller now, his arrogance replaced by an expression of defeat. "Your Honor," Federal Prosecutor Sarah Whitman began, "the defendant Donald Thompson not only orchestrated a criminal scheme of antique theft, but also systematically manipulated homeowners' associations to attack the very historic fabric of our rural communities." In the gallery, dozens of historic homeowners and farmers from across the Shenandoah Valley watched intently. Caroline Chen had organized a massive presence to demonstrate the community impact of Thompson's crimes. "The evidence demonstrates that the defendant and his associates caused irreparable harm to several historic collections," Whitman continued. "Some pieces, sold to international buyers under falsified documentation, can never be recovered." Margaret squeezed her father's hand as Thompson rose to make his final statement before sentencing. His face was marked, not by regret, but by a calculated bitterness. "I merely implemented existing rules," Thompson argued weakly. "HOAs have the authority to uphold community standards. If some people insist on turning their backyards into private museums—" "Objection, Your Honor," Whitman interrupted. "The defendant is trying to minimize crimes for which he has already pleaded guilty." Judge Patricia Montgomery, a gray-haired lady known for her defense of historical heritage, removed her glasses with a sigh. "Mr. Thompson, your actions were not only criminal, they were a deliberate attack on American cultural heritage. This court views with particular gravity your exploitation of HOAs to facilitate an international antiquities trafficking scheme." The verdict was delivered with the solemnity that the moment demanded. Thompson received 15 years in federal prison, substantial fines, and the obligation to compensate all victims. Most importantly, he was ordered to provide all information on international buyers to facilitate the recovery of the missing pieces. After the sentencing, in the hallway of the courthouse, Benjamin was approached by Douglas McPherson, the former HOA president, who had testified against Thompson. "Mr. Foster, we did it. Your fight opened a lot of people's eyes." "It wasn't just my fight," Benjamin replied, observing the diverse group of people around him. Farmers, historians, lawyers, and residents united in a common cause. "It was the fight of everyone who believes that our history deserves to be preserved." Rita Martinez approached with encouraging news. "The FBI has just recovered 3 more pieces from its collection in Germany." The buyer was completely cooperative when he learned of the item's origin. The following weeks brought a remarkable transformation in Winchester. The community mobilized to help restore the Foster collection. Robert Mills led a team of volunteers specialized in restoring old equipment, while Caroline Chen coordinated the historical documentation of each piece recovered. "Look at this," Margaret commented one afternoon, showing an article from the Washington Post. "Our story inspired state legislation to protect historic properties from abuse by HOAs." Benjamin, sitting in his favorite rocking chair, watched young agricultural history students examine his restored Fordson F. The tractor, now properly documented and preserved, had become a symbol of resistance and cultural preservation. "You know, Dad," Margaret sat down next to him, "when all this started, I thought we were just fighting for our collection. But we've created something much bigger." "A movement," added Caroline, who was joining them with a cup of coffee. "People realize that preserving our history isn't just about keeping old objects. It's about keeping alive the memory of who we are and where we came from." The Fosters' backyard had been transformed into a small, open-air museum with information boards detailing the history of each farm implement. School groups made regular visits, and historians from all over the country came to study the now properly preserved collection. "Margaret," Benjamin called to his daughter a few days later, "I found this in the attic." He held up an old camera. "Your mother used to photograph every piece in the collection when it was restored. She said that each photo told a story of renewal." Inspired, Margaret organized a photographic exhibition at the local library, combining her mother's old photos with images from the recent struggle to preserve the collection. The exhibition, entitled Seeds of Memory, the American Agricultural Legacy, attracted visitors from all over the neighboring states. one quiet Sunday afternoon. As Benjamin explained the workings of the colonial plow to a group of fascinated children, he realized that his collection had finally found its true purpose. It wasn't just a collection of old machines, it was a living portal to American history, a tangible reminder of the generations who built the country with their own hands. Each piece has a story, he explained to the children, his wrinkled hands caressing the worn metal. And now, thanks to all of you, those stories will continue to be told. Margaret watched from a distance, moved. The fight to preserve her father's collection had turned into a much bigger victory, a victory for memory, for community, and for the very essence of what it meant to be part of American history. The sun was beginning to set over Winchester, casting a golden glow over the restored machines. On the horizon, the Blue Ridge Mountains stood as silent witnesses to yet another chapter in the never-ending story of the Shenandoah Valley, where past and present were in perfect harmony, preserved for future generations.